I stepped into the dusty garage that afternoon, the air thick with oil and heat pressing against my skin like a heavy blanket. Tools scattered across the workbench like forgotten thoughts. And there she was, her silhouette bent over the engine, focused and unyielding. She straightened slow, eyes meeting mine unflinching, her voice low as she directed me to the wrench waiting on the pegboard. I felt the immediate pull, my hands unsteady on the cold metal, the weight of it grounding me in the moment. Silence settled heavy between us, the broken machine mirroring something unspoken, a quiet tension coiling in the dim light. The garage sat isolated on the ranch's edge, fields stretching endless under the relentless sun, golden waves rippling like they held secrets of their own. I'd driven out there seeking work, the kind that kept hands busy and mind from wandering too far. My boots crunched on the gravel path leading up, each step kicking up small clouds that hung in the still air. Sweat already beaded on my skin, trickling down my back before I even reached the open door, the heat wrapping around me like an old coat too tight. She was there from the start, wiping grease from her hands on a rag that looked as worn as the ranch itself. Her introduction came sparse, just her name, Lena, spoken like a tool handle smoothed from years of use, no frills, no extra words. It fit her, that name, solid and unpretentious. I nodded, introducing myself quick, but her eyes took me in steady, measuring the newcomer against the work ahead. I watched her movements then, efficient as the turn of a well-oiled gear. Her body moved taut under the faded shirt, sleeves rolled to her elbows, revealing forearms marked with faint scars from past fixes. She didn't rush, each gesture deliberate, like she knew the garage's rhythm better than her own breath. The air carried a tang of gasoline mixed with the dry earth blowing in from outside, pulling me into her pace without a word. It settled in my lungs, sharp and familiar, reminding me of long days on other ranches where silence spoke louder than shouts. Initial awkwardness hung in the heat, my fingers fumbling a bit as I picked up a rag to help wipe down the workbench. Her gaze lingered, not harsh, but assessing more than just my grip on the tools. It felt like she saw the uncertainty beneath, the way I'd come here running from something back home. The sun slanted through the open door, casting long shadows across the concrete floor cracked from years of use, dust motes dancing lazy in the beams. I shifted my stance, boots scraping soft, trying to match her ease, but the warmth pressed in, making every breath feel thicker. She handed me a socket set without looking, her fingers brushing mine brief, calloused, skin against skin. It sent a small jolt, gone quick, but enough to notice. The garage felt smaller then, walls lined with shelves of parts rusted from neglect, the engine in the truck bed waiting like a challenge. Lena leaned against the fender, arms crossed loose, explaining the basics of the day's task in clipped sentences. Her voice had that low timbre, carrying over the distant hum of insects outside, pulling me closer without effort. I followed her lead, sorting bolts into trays, the metal cool against my palms despite the heat. Her efficiency drew me in, the way she tested a wrench's fit with a twist of her wrist, precise and sure. Sweat dampened the collar of my shirt, and I caught her watching once, eyes dark in the dim interior, holding the garage's shadows. It wasn't judgment, but something deeper, like she recognized the pull of this life, the isolation that bound you to the land and whatever company it offered. The fields outside pressed against the windows, endless under the sun, mirroring the quiet stretch between us. I wiped my brow, the rag coming away streaked with grime, and felt the awkwardness ease just a fraction as I handed her a part she needed. Her nod came small, approval in the tilt of her head, and the air's tang sharpened, gasoline and earth blending with the faint scent of her sweat, clean and unmasked. It pulled me further into her rhythm, bodies moving in the space without crowding, but aware. As the afternoon wore on, the heat built, shirts clinging slight to our skin. Lena's movements stayed steady, body taut as she reached for a higher shelf, the roll of her shoulders catching the light. I observed it all, the efficiency hiding a resilience I'd only begun to glimpse. The initial tension lingered, my hands still unsteady on the tools, but her gaze steadied me, measuring not just skill, but the person holding the wrench. We paused once, her leaning on the workbench, water bottle passed between us, wordless. The cool sip cut the dryness in my throat. And in that moment, her eyes met mine again, unflinching, pulling at edges I kept hidden. The ranch's isolation weighed then, town's judgments a distant echo, but real in the quiet. Sweat beaded on her temple, and I resisted the urge to wipe it away, the air thick with unspoken pulls. As she handed me the first wrench, its weight solid in my palm, the engine's stubborn silence deepened, drawing us toward the real work ahead. We popped the hood together, the metal creaking like old bones under pressure. The engine lay exposed, rusted parts gleaming faint in the dim light filtering through the garage's grimy windows. Wires tangled like veins worn thin, oil stains mapping years of breakdowns no one had bothered to chase down fully. Weena leaned in first, her shadow falling across the block, making the shadows pool deeper in the crevices. She explained the fault low, voice rumbling soft against the engine's hum of silence. Her fingers traced the wires, deliberate, like mapping hidden paths through unfamiliar land. "Seized up here," she said, nail scraping light over a corroded line. "Spark won't jump right. Been ignoring it too long." Her touch lingered on the ignition coil, steady, as if coaxing a secret from the metal. I nodded, leaning closer to see. My questions hung brief in the air. What causes that? Age, or something hit it? The words came out quieter than I meant, swallowed by the garage's hush. Her answers came clipped, but weighted with years of fixes that had marked her hands. Both. Dust gets in, moisture follows. Corrodes everything slow. She didn't look up, eyes fixed on the part, but the tone carried experience. The kind earned from engines that quit at the worst hours, leaving you stranded under endless sky. The garage walls seemed to close in then. Rough concrete pressing at my back, the scent of stale oil thickening with every breath. Dust motes danced lazy in the slanted beams from the half-open door, golden flecks, swirling like thoughts I couldn't pin down. Outside, the fields whispered wind through dry grass, but inside, the world narrowed to this machine and her nearness. Her proximity stirred something low in my gut. As she pointed to the seized bolt deep in the block, her shoulder brushed the shelf behind her, rattling a loose can of nuts that clattered soft. The contact was accidental, fabric against wood, but it sent a warmth radiating, her body heat cutting through the cool shadow of the hood. I shifted, boot scraping concrete, trying to focus on the bolt's stubborn gleam, but her arm extended close, elbow nearly grazing mine. Internal churn rose steady, self-reliance clashing hard with the need for her steady hand. I'd fixed things before, alone in barns back home, wrench turning until my palms blistered. But here, the bolt's resistance felt bigger, like it held more than rust. Echoes of isolation I'd carried across those fields. Why did her guidance pull at me this way? Like handing over the tool meant yielding something deeper. A trust I wasn't sure I could give without the ground shifting underfoot. Lena straightened slight, wiping her brow with the back of her wrist, leaving a faint streak of grease. Her eyes flicked to mine, dark and unflinching, holding the dim light like they held back words. It's wedged tight, needs both of us to torque it free. The statement hung simple, but it landed heavy, implying the shared effort ahead, bodies attuned to the same rhythm. I gripped the edge of the fender, metal cool under my fingers, grounding the churn. The engine's parts gleamed mocking, rusted edges sharp as unspoken doubts. Her fingers hovered near the bolt again, tracing its head, and I caught the faint tremor. Not fear, but focus, the kind that came from wrestling machines that fought back. It mirrored my own tension, the push-pull of wanting to prove myself while craving her direction. Dust settled on the workbench nearby, fine layer like time accumulating unnoticed. The air hummed with the distant call of a crow outside, but inside, her breath evened the space between us. I asked another question, voice low. Ever had one this bad? It felt like probing more than the engine, testing the waters of her world. She paused, hand still on the wire. Once. Left me walking miles at dusk. Taught me not to go alone next time. Her words carried layers, clipped but open at the edges, hinting at ranch life, where breakdowns bound you closer to whoever shared the load. The conservative town's shadow loomed faint, judgments that kept folks at arm's length, but here, necessity bridged it. My pulse thudded, uneven, the proximity amplifying every small shift. Her sleeve brushing my arm as she adjusted the light, the beam catching the curve of her forearm, taut from years of turns like this. Self-reliance screamed to step back, handle it solo. But the bolt's seize mocked that, demanding her knowledge, her touch to guide. The walls echoed soft with our movements, shelves of parts watching like silent ranch hands. Her scent cut through the oil, clean sweat mixed with earth, pulling me deeper into the assessment. Questions faded, replaced by the churn's quiet roar, the need for her hand steadying more than just the wrench. With tools in hand now, we leaned in closer, the work demanding shared focus. The engine's silence, pulling us into its fight. I gripped the wrench tight, the metal biting into my palm like a promise of the work ahead. Lena's instructions came measured, her voice cutting through the garage's hush without raising. Angle it here, steady pressure, turn slow. I followed, leaning over the engine block, the hood's shadow falling cool across my arms. The bolt stared back, rusted head unyielding, but her words pulled me into the rhythm, body aligning with the task. She positioned herself beside me, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine light, a contact gone in a breath, but lingering in the air. Her breath stayed even, rising and falling steady against the engine's dead hum. The scent of her clean sweat cut through the oil's thick tang, sharp and grounding, like fresh-cut hay after rain. It mixed with the garage's earthiness, pulling me deeper into the space we shared, tools clinking soft as we settled. The first turns resisted hard, the bolt twisting maybe a hair before locking up again. It felt like the tension coiling in my chest, tight and unrelenting, mirroring the machine's stubborn fight. I pushed harder, muscles straining under my shirt, sweat beading fresh on my brow. Lena watched, her own wrench ready, but she let me try first. Her silence a quiet trust that both eased and pressured. I watched her hands then, precise as they always were. Knuckles whitening on her own tool as she tested a nearby fitting. Her fingers moved sure, calluses mapping years of these battles, the skin rough but deliberate. Each twist showed control, no wasted motion, and I found myself matching it, my grip tightening to echo hers. The garage light caught the faint grease under her nails, dark lines like veins in the earth outside. Silence amplified every scrape of metal on metal, the wrench's edge grinding against the bolt like teeth on bone. Every shift in our stance narrowed the space between us, her boot nudging mine accidental as we adjusted for leverage. The concrete floor felt solid underfoot, but the air hummed with the effort, dust stirring slight from our movements. Outside, the fields held still under the sun, but here the world shrank to this engine and the pull of her nearness. My pulse quickened at the labor's intimacy, bodies attuned to the machine's fight without words. Her arm extended parallel to mine, elbow close, the heat from her skin radiating through the thin fabric of our sleeves. I could feel the sink in our breaths, uneven now from the strain, but matched. Inhale as I turned, exhale as it resisted. The bolt gave nothing, mocking the churn inside me, self-reliance fraying at the edges where her presence anchored. We traded the wrench once, her hand brushing mine in the pass, warm against the cool tool. The contact sparked brief, gone quick, but it settled low, stirring the quiet pull I'd felt since stepping in. Lena leaned in deeper, her shoulder pressing firmer now, guiding without touching. "Counter it from this side," she said, voice low, the words vibrating through the space like a distant rumble. I nodded, repositioning, the engine block rough under my free hand. The resistance built, my arm aching from the torque, but watching her kept me steady. Her knuckles stayed white, tool turning in small arcs, testing the bolt's give. The garage's walls echoed the scrapes, amplifying the intimacy of the work, bodies close, focused on the same unyielding point. Sweat trickled down my temple, and I wiped it with my shoulder, catching her do the same, our motions mirroring in the dim light. Tension coiled tighter, the bolt's fight echoing the unspoken between us, rural isolation pressing in like the heat. The town's distant judgments faded here, but their weight lingered in the silence, making every shared effort feel heavier. Her scent sharpened with the sweat, clean and real, cutting the oil like a blade through dust. Pulse thudding, I pushed again, the wrench slipping once, clattering soft against the block. She steadied it without a word, her hand hovering near, ready but not taking over. The space narrowed further, our stances aligned, breaths sinking uneven in the hush. The machine demanded this attunement, bodies leaning into the fight together, and I felt the quicken spread, intimacy weaving through the labor like wire under strain. Frustration edged in as the bolt held fast, my muscles burning from the failed turns. Lena's eyes met mine, brief, dark, and unflinching, holding the garage's shadows. As it built, her voice dropped softer, guiding the next attempt with a murmur that pulled us deeper into the repair. Heat pressed and relentless, the garage turning into a forge under the afternoon sun. Shirts clung to our skin now, damp patches spreading across my back and under my arms. The engine's warmth radiated up from the block, mirroring the air between us, thick, unyielding, building pressure that had nothing to do with the bolt. I could feel it in every breath, the way the oil scent mixed with our sweat, turning the space heavier, more intimate than the work alone should allow. We alternated pulls on the wrench, trading off to keep the torque steady. Lena went first this time, her arm extending close as she leaned in, muscles flexing under the rolled sleeves. Her elbow grazed mine, accidental, a brush of fabric and skin that sent a spark up my arm, gone quick but echoing in the quiet. I took over next, gripping tight, turning with everything I had, the metal groaning faint but holding fast. The bolt shifted slightly, a small give that made my pulse jump, like the first crack in dry earth after rain. Hope flickered, but it jammed again, hard, the resistance doubling down, forcing us to brace together for leverage. Our bodies pressed side by side now, shoulders touching firm against the fender's edge. Her hip nudged mine as we torqued in sync, the contact steadying the wrench but stirring something deeper, a warmth spreading through the thin barrier of our shirts. I felt her through the fabric, solid and real, her body heat cutting the engine's chill like sun-breaking clouds. My heart thudded loud in my ears, like a dropped socket clattering across concrete, sharp, unavoidable, bouncing in the hush. Sweat trickled down my spine, and I shifted closer without thinking, our stances locking to counter the bolt's fight. The garage light caught the sheen on her neck, a faint glow that pulled my eyes there, away from the tool. Glances exchanged brief across the hood, her eyes dark, holding the garage's shadows like they held back her own churn. No words, just that look. Unflinching, probing, seeing the strain in my jaw, the way my knuckles paled on the wrench. I met it for a second, then dropped back to the metal, but the weight lingered, amplifying the rural isolation that wrapped this place tight. Fields stretched out beyond the walls, endless and empty. The ranch, a world unto itself, where breakdowns like this bound you closer than choice. The town's judgments echoed distant but real in the quiet. Whispers from church pews and market lines about folks who stepped too close, who let touches linger beyond work. Conservative winds that choked differences, leaving scars like the rust on this engine. But here, necessity overrode it. Our bodies attuned in the labor, elbows grazing again as Lena adjusted her grip. The air thickened with it, gasoline tang sharpening with our breaths, pulling me into her rhythm, despite the churn rising low in my gut. We braced harder, my free hand steadying on the block, fingers inches from hers. The bolt's jam forced a longer hold, our arms straining parallel, heat building where our sides met. Her breath came uneven now, sinking with mine in the push. A shared exhale as the wrench slipped once, nearly dropping. I caught it, palm scraping rough, and she leaned in to help, her chest brushing my shoulder, brief, accidental, but enough to jolt the thud in my chest louder. Sweat beaded on her temple, and I watched it trace down, resisting the urge to wipe it away. The engine mocked us, parts gleaming faint in the dim, but the proximity anchored the effort, her warmth a counter to the metal's cold resistance. Rural life weighed heavy then, self-reliance fraying in the isolation, where help came rare and judgments sharper for it. Yet her nearness eased the edges, bodies moving as one against the machine's stubborn heart. Another pull, her arm extending over mine this time, elbow pressing firm as we torqued together. The graze turned deliberate in necessity, skin meeting where sleeves rode up, sending warmth radiating up my side. Heart thudding relentless, like tools scattered in haste, I felt the pull strengthen, unspoken but real in the shadows her eyes held. The fields outside hummed wind through grass, but inside, the quiet amplified, every shift, every shared strain. Frustration coiled tighter, the bolt's slight shift teasing before the jam bit back. Lena's gaze flicked to mine again, dark and steady, pulling at the tension between us. The town's echo faded further, isolation binding us in this heat, shirts clinging like second skin. We held the position, breaths mingling in the hush, the work demanding more than hands, trust, proximity, the warmth that mirrored the engine's hidden fire. She murmured then, voice low and soft, to hold steady, her presence anchoring the effort like a root in dry soil. It pulled us deeper, the bolt's resistance fading against the charge building slow. Lena's murmur lingered in the thick air, her words pulling me back to the wrench. Hold it steady now. Wait for my signal. Her tone came low, vibrating through the space between us like the low rumble of the truck's frame settling after a hard jolt. I nodded, grip tightening on the handle, the metal's chill seeping into my palm despite the sweat slicking my skin. The bolt loomed there, rusted and defiant, its edges biting back at every previous turn. Our bodies stayed braced, shoulders pressed close, the engine block a shared barrier that felt thinner by the second. We leaned in deeper together, the hood's shadow enveloping us like dusk falling early. The bolt's resistance tugged at us both, drawing our hands toward the same tight point in the depths of the block. My arm extended full, muscles taut under the strain, her presence a steady weight at my side. The garage's dim light caught the faint gleam of oil on the parts, but my focus narrowed to the wrench's head, wedged against that unyielding hex. Sweat dripped from my brow, splashing silent on the manifold, and I felt her shift closer, her boot nudging mine for balance, the contact grounding amid the heat. Then it happened. Her palm covered mine's sudden, warm skin pressing over my knuckles on the cold metal. The wrench steadied under the dual grip, her fingers wrapping firm to guide the turn. That warmth spread instant, cutting through the chill like sunlight piercing fog over the fields. Our sleeves had ridden up in the effort, exposing forearms slick with effort, and where they met, skin on skin, the jolt ran sharp up my arm, electric and unbidden. It settled low in my chest, a thud that echoed the bolt's faint groan as we torqued together. Time slowed in that hold, the world shrinking to the shared pressure of our hands. The silence thickened around us, heavy as the dust settling on the workbench, broken only by the scrape of metal yielding grudgingly. Our breaths synced uneven, mine catching sharp as hers released slow, the rhythm pulling us deeper into the moment. Her palm stayed there, calluses rough against my smoother skin, the heat of her body radiating through the thin barrier of the wrench. I could feel the pulse in her fingers, faint but real, matching the erratic beat in my veins, the engine's fight forgotten in the intimacy of the touch. The garage walls faded, the endless fields outside a distant hum, leaving only this, her hand over mine, guiding without force, but insistent. The bolt resisted one last beat, then gave way with a low creak, threads catching after all the strain. But neither of us pulled back right away. The pressure lingered, her warmth anchoring the turn, skin meeting in that exposed space where sweat made everything slicker, more real. A tremor ran through her fingers, subtle, and I wondered if it mirrored the turn rising in me, self-reliance cracking under the weight of this shared effort. Our eyes met then, unflinching across the hood's edge. Hers held dark, pulling in the garage's shadows but softened at the core with something raw, a revelation breaking through the mechanical focus. No words, just that gaze locking mine, seeing the jolt I'd felt, the way the touch had shifted everything. It stripped the labor bare, exposing the pull that had coiled since I stepped through the door, the unspoken tension mirroring the bolt's seize. Her breath hitched slight, syncing with my own uneven pull, the silence now alive with what the contact had unleashed. The wrench turned full finally, the bolt loosening free with a final grind, parts shifting loose in the block. We held the position a second longer, hands still layered, the warmth lingering like engine heat after shutdown. Then, slow, we pulled back, her palm lifting deliberate from mine, leaving a ghost of that pressure on my skin. The air charged heavier now, thick with the echo of the touch, the garage's hush amplifying the shift. Dust motes swirled lazy in the beam from the window, but the space between us felt electric, the machine's yield paling against the revelation in her eyes. I set the wrench down careful, metal clinking soft on the tray, my fingers tingling where hers had been. Lena straightened, wiping her hands on her jeans, but her gaze flicked back to mine once, holding the charge. The fields outside pressed against the glass, golden under the fading sun. But inside, the silence bridged us, pulling toward whatever came next in the deepening dusk. The engine groaned low once the bolt came free, a deep rumble settling into quiet as parts shifted loose in the block. It held there, no full turnover yet, but the stubborn heart of it eased just enough. We set the tools aside, wrenches clinking soft on the workbench, the sound swallowed quick by the garage's hush. That silence amplified the aftermath, turning every small shift into something louder, my boot scraping concrete, the faint drip of oil from a loose line. The air hung thick with it, the scent of heated metal mixing with our sweat, marking the space where the work had broken into something more. Lena stepped away measured, her body pulling back slow from the hood, but the warmth from her palm lingered on my skin like engine heat after a long run. My fingers flexed, absent, chasing the ghost of that pressure, the way her calluses had pressed, firm and real. It settled deep, a steady burn under my knuckles, refusing to fade as I wiped my hands on a rag, the fabric rough against the tingle. She busied herself with the tray, sorting sockets with deliberate motions, but her shoulders stayed taut, the roll of her neck catching the dim light as she avoided my eyes at first. Words faltered between us, hanging awkward in the cooling air. She broke it, sparse, voice low as she nodded at the block. Had a truck like this once. Seized worse. Left me stranded out by the ridge at night. Her tone probed gentle, not pushing, but opening a crack, like testing if the engine would hold after the fix. I leaned against the fender, the metal still warm under my palms, and murmured back about a similar breakdown back home, walking miles under stars that felt too close. The sharing came halting, fragments pieced from the quiet, her losses hinted at in the clip of her words. Fixes that mended machines, but left other things cracked. We traded pieces of rural lives then, self-reliance, scarred by hidden longings that the land couldn't fill. She spoke of ranches where work filled the days, but nights brought the weight of solitude, church eyes watching from town lines. Kept to myself after that, she said, gaze dropping to the rag in her hands, twisting it slow. I mirrored it with my own, fields that swallowed steps, family ties pulling tight against desires that didn't fit the straight rows. The conservative grip echoed in both, judgments that scarred deeper than rust, leaving us to mend alone. But here, in this garage, the sharing eased the edges, voices low against the settling dust. The pulse strengthened with each word, her gaze lifting to meet mine, softening the hard lines and the dim light filtering through the grimy panes. Those dark eyes held less shadow now, pulling me in like the horizon at dusk, unflinching but warm at the core. I felt it coil low, the intimacy of the touch replaying in the space between breaths, her proximity still close enough to catch the faint earth on her skin. My pulse thudded steady, mirroring the engine's faint after hum, the warmth spreading from my hand up my arm, rooting me to the moment. Dust settled around us fine, coating the workbench and our boots, marking the shift from task to something unnamed, a bridge built in the labor's wake. The garage felt smaller, walls leaning in like old fences holding secrets, the air cooling but charged with what the touch had stirred. Her fingers brushed the edge of the hood as she closed it partial, the creak echoing soft, and I caught the tremor there, subtle as a wire loosening. As dusk fell outside, painting the fields in deepening blue, conversation turned inward, drawing us closer in the hush, words probing the longings we'd only hinted at before. Lena's voice dropped lower as the light faded, her words coming sparse at first, like stones skipping across still water. She leaned against the workbench, rag forgotten in her fist, eyes fixed on the deepening blue beyond the windows. Had someone once, she said, the confession hanging heavy in the cooling air. Years back, before this ranch took all of me. We worked side by side, fixing fences under the same sun. But the town, it choked everything. Her tone carried the ache of old heartbreaks, love twisted tight by conservative winds that swept through church basements and backroad whispers. Eyes from the pews, tallying every glance that lingered too long, sermons on straight paths that bent nothing but broke what didn't fit. She paused, breath steadying, the garage's hush wrapping her words like insulation against the chill creeping in. I felt the pull of her story hook deep, mirroring fractures I'd buried under layers of self-reliance. My own desires had stayed hidden, fields back home watching every stolen glance like silent judges, grass whispering secrets to the wind. Same for me, I murmured, voice low against the settling dust. Grew up on a spread like this, but the nights, they'd stretch empty. A touch here, a look there. Always glancing over shoulders for the church crowd, or family ties that pulled you straight. The words spilled halting, rural lives scarred by the same grip, expectations heavy as harvest loads, longings choked until they withered like untended rose. Her gaze lifted then, dark eyes holding mine unflinching, the shared weight easing the isolation we'd both carried alone. The garage felt smaller with each truth aired, walls drawing in like the close of dusk, shelves of parts lining the edges like witnesses to the unfolding. Bolts and wires huddled in trays, rusted edges catching the last slants of light, silent keepers of the revelations cracking open between us. The air thickened, oil's tang blending with the earth's dry breath from outside, pulling us into a space where the engine's fix paled against these hidden histories. Lena shifted, boots scraping soft on the concrete, her body taut under the faded shirt, shoulders carrying the echo of losses she'd named. We reached for rags at the same time, hands brushing again in the narrow space by the bench. Intentional now, no accident in the graze of knuckles. Her fingers trembled, faint, a tremor running through the calluses that had steadied wrenches and lives alike, the contact sending warmth up my arm like a spark jumping wire. I didn't pull away, letting the brush linger, skin meeting skin in the dim, the tremor mirroring the coil building low in my gut. It felt like acceptance settling heavy, not forced but earned through the labor and the words, the conservative shadows outside losing their bite in this shared hush. Tension coiled slow between us, like unraveled wire twisting back on itself, sharp edges catching but holding firm. Her proximity stirred it deeper, elbow close as she wiped a streak from the block, the motion pulling her nearer without rush. I caught the faint scent of her again, sweat and earth clean under the grease, mixing with the night's cool press against the windows. The fields beyond blurred to shadow, isolating us in this tender revelation, the ranch's edge a barrier against the town's distant hum. Church eyes couldn't reach here, not in the dim where truths breathed free, heartbreaks named turning to bridges rather than breaks. She spoke more then, fragments of that lost love, nights in the barn, hands linking brief before the wind carried warnings. She left for the city lights, Lena said, voice edged with the weight of it, chasing air that didn't choke. I nodded, my own buried desires rising to meet hers, stolen moments by the creek, water rushing over stones while eyes from the house scanned the horizon. The mirroring pulled us closer, bodies attuned now beyond the machine, the garage's shelves leaning in as if to guard the unfolding. Dust motes hung suspended in the fading light, marking time's slow turn, the tremor in her fingers echoing in my pulse, steady but quickening. Night pressed full against the glass, stars pricking through the dark like hesitant promises, the isolation wrapping us tight but warm. Her gaze softened further, holding the revelations we'd aired, the weight of acceptance settling like dew on cooling soil, heavy but life-giving. Tension hummed in the space, unraveled wire finding form, hands still close from the rag's reach, the brush turning to a hold that spoke louder than words. With truths aired bare, her approach slowed deliberate, bridging the final space between us, the hush alive with what came next. Lena's approach came slow, deliberate, her boot shifting soft on the concrete as she closed the gap. Her palm settled on my waist first, fingers pressing warm through the damp fabric of my shirt, pulling without force, just enough to draw me in. The contact grounded me, calluses rough against the curve of my hip, sending a steady heat radiating up my side. I didn't pull back, my own hand rising, hesitant to rest on her arm, feeling the taut muscle beneath, the faint tremor that matched the coil in my chest. The garage's hush wrapped us tight, night pressing black against the windows, fields lost to shadow outside. Our bodies came close in that quiet, her breath warm on my neck as she tilted in, lips meeting mine soft but sure, no rush in the press. It started tentative, mouths brushing like tools finding fit, then deepened, her tongue tracing light, tasting the salt of sweat and earth we'd shared all day. My free hand slid up her back, fingers splaying under the hem of her shirt, tracing the line of her spine, skin hot and slick where the fabric clung. She mirrored it, palm slipping beneath mine, exploring the dip of my waist, thumb circling slow over the ridge of my hip bone, drawing a shiver that pulled us tighter. Heat built steady between us, shirts riding up as hands wandered, her fingers grazing the underside of my breast, cupping gentle but firm, thumb brushing the peak until it hardened under her touch. I gasped soft into her mouth, the sound swallowed by the kiss, my own hand following the curve of her side, palm flattening against her stomach, feeling the muscles tense and release with each breath. The garage faded, shelves of parts blurring in the dim, the engine a forgotten shadow on the workbench. Her leg nudged between mine, thigh pressing firm, rocking subtle to build the friction that made my pulse thud loud, syncing with hers like hearts hammering in unison. We broke the kiss once, foreheads resting, breaths mingling, uneven in the close space. "This," she whispered, voice low against my ear. "Us. It's ours, not theirs." The words affirmed the promise, chosen paths defying the town's silent grip, church whispers and neighbor eyes that choked before but couldn't touch this. I nodded, lips brushing her jaw, murmuring back about fields that watched but couldn't hold us now, the conservative winds bending around what we'd claimed. Her hand traced higher, fingers teasing the edge of my bra, slipping under to palm my breast full, rolling the nipple between thumb and forefinger until I arched into her, heat pooling low, aching. The rhythm took over then, bodies moving as one against the workbench's edge, her hip grinding into mine, building the pressure that made my knees weaken. I tugged her shirt up, mouth finding the salt on her collarbone, tongue tracing down to the swell of her chest, nipping light at the skin above her heart. She groaned low, hands sliding down to cut me through my jeans, fingers pressing insistent over the seam, circling until the denim grew damp, the friction pulling a whimper from my throat. Vulnerability poured out, shared like tools passed hand to hand, raw, unhidden, her body yielding as I explored lower, fingers dipping under her waistband, tracing the soft hair there, then further, finding her wet and warm, stroking slow to match the thud of our hearts. Release came mutual, her fingers working me steady while mine circled her core, breaths ragged in the hush, the garage alive with our rhythm, hips bucking soft, gasps echoing off the concrete like distant thunder. She came first, body tensing against mine, a low moan vibrating through her chest as she clenched around my touch. It pulled me over, waves crashing hot and sharp, her name slipping out in the peak. We held there, slick and spent, hands lingering on skin, the night's cool air raising gooseflesh where heat ebbed. As we part breathless, foreheads touching one last time, the night holds the new beginning, stars watching silent through the glass. Her hand lingers on mine one last time. The silence now a bridge, not a weight, warm and steady in the dim. If you've felt that quiet pull in hidden labors, share your moment below. Subscribe for more stories of connections forged in the dust and heat.